tear it falls and hits the ground. A tree it falls without a sound. A bird it calls and sends you home. A man he sits in the cold all alone.
Hi, Cara. Welcome to the Joy of Sunflowers. Thank you so much for joining me. Please introduce yourself a little bit to everyone.
My name is Cara Radke. I'm currently located in Midland, Texas. I'm originally from Houston. My It's currently my husband and I. We don't have any living children, and we have two dogs, Rocky and Bailey, and two cats, Piper and Toby. So we're out here, and yeah, that's pretty much mostly everything about me. I work from home. Midland's kind of a small town, so we moved here, I think in the middle of COVID. So I think we're finally kind of starting to make friends with the pandemic ending and, being able to get out and be more social and stuff. So it's been good.
Yeah, it must have been hard to move during all of that, because I think my family moved as well, and it was a surreal time. We kind of just hunkered down. I don't we still haven't ventured enough. I think we need to venture out more. But yeah. Great. So can we get into your story, the beginning, from right at the beginning? Did you always want kids, or was it something that you sort of came to?
So we always wanted children. I think so. In total, I've had 4 losses, but our first loss, it was definitely a surprise. We were really wanting children, but I don't think at that point in time we were thinking it was going to happen so soon. So all of our other pregnancies have 100% been very planned and prayed for. So there was kind of a bit of a shock there, just kind of at the first time, because, we didn't really know. I don't think we hadn't fully thought about what all we had signed up for at the time, but unfortunately ended up in a miscarriage anyway. But so we've always wanted children, and I guess our wedding anniversary actually is coming up. It'll be 2 years on Monday. So we've been married for 2 years, and it's been an interesting kind of start to the journey. So do you want to jump into kind of my whole story and where we are now?
Go into the whole story and get to where we are now. Yeah. Just with obviously the first 4 and moving into this one.
Yes. So I want to say it was, again, middle of COVID whenever we got pregnant the first time. And again, it was an initial shock. But we, started to get really excited, and we're like, okay, this is happening. We started to plan for things. And of course, it was really hard to get into any kind of doctor office just because everything was like really, really crazy. And it was also my first pregnancy. So in the States, they typically don't see you, until you're, either 8 to 10 weeks along. And so everybody I had contacted, they had put me on the schedule, but I think my first obstetrician appointment was, I think, at 10 weeks. And so I was actually traveling at that time back and forth from Houston to Midland. And at that time, I actually was in Midland, and it was my first pregnancy. I didn't really know what to expect. I felt like I was feeling all the things you should be feeling, but then, I started having spotting and cramping, and I was like, okay, that probably isn't good. And so I called my doctor's office, and they were like, of course, it could be normal, but if it increases, let us know. And so I just kind of kept going about my day. I think I want to say I was bleeding, and it was light for 7 days. And then I remember it was a Wednesday, and at that time, our company, they were doing furloughs to make sure that everybody could, stay in the company, just because COVID shut everything down at the time. So those 2 weeks I was actually working, and my personal manager was on furlough. So she didn't have her work laptop, her cell phone was turned off. So she was completely disconnected. And we had a huge project where we were going out to our COO, and I had to do all the financials for it. It was a really big deal. And as I'm doing these financials, I'm in like meeting after meeting to get everything done. Just my body just started to cramp really bad. And I could just tell, I was like, okay, this is not normal. And I was scared because I was still kind of new to the company, but I also knew how important that day was to get work done. And it was kind of funny. Now I think it's funny. At the time, I was very scared, but I called, it was my manager's director at the time because he was working, and he picked up the phone, and I don't even think I had like come to terms of what was happening. And I was like, Fred, I go, hi, I go, and I just started crying, and I was like, I think I'm having a miscarriage and I need to go to the ER. And he was like, oh my gosh. He goes, okay, like, it's like, okay, like, do what you need to do. I was like, okay. I go, I'm going to take my laptop with me. And he was like, no, don't take your laptop. He was like, just go to the ER, like, take care of yourself. Like, you're perfectly fine. You know, not you're perfectly fine, but regarding to work, he was like, you don't need to worry about work. So anyway, I got to the ER. My husband drove me, but at the time you couldn't go in there by yourself. So he had to drop me off. And so I had to I was the only person in the ER because everybody was too afraid to go to the hospital. So it was just me and the doctors. And I think at that time I had already passed everything naturally. So by the time we did the sono, they couldn't find anything in my uterus. And so they just kind of sent me home and were like, we think you had a miscarriage. You know, we're so sorry. And it kind of I'm not a very emotional person. So whenever I went home, I kind of like, I was sad, but I didn't really, think. I kind of just was like, okay, well, like life goes on. I'm just going to kind of start doing, my day-to-day things. But I think what's funny about grief is, for me personally, my grief always hits me like months down the road. But anyway, at the time we decided to take a year off because, at the time we weren't really trying for children. We still had some things that we wanted to do. And so after about a year, we started trying again, and we got pregnant again, and we were really excited. And I kind of in the back of my mind was like, I think that first miscarriage, I think it just was maybe like a one-off. So maybe like everything's fine. And so this time I was living full-time in Midland. And I immediately, the instant I got a positive test, I contacted the local OB office here that's like down the street from me to let them know, hey, I'm pregnant. And I did let them know, I was like, hey, I have had a miscarriage before. And they were like, okay, we don't see patients until like 8 to 10 weeks. So, we'll schedule you whenever you finish out the new patient paperwork. So in the meantime, I called. There was a local midwife nearby, and she called me back like the same day. And she asked if I wanted to get blood work done. I was like, yep, let's do blood work. And so we were doing draws, and my progesterone was really low. I don't even know if she pulled my HCG or not, but I want to say around 6 weeks, I started to bleed again. And then I went in for a sonogram. I think it was around 7 weeks. And there was a baby, but it had unfortunately stopped growing at 5 weeks. So I guess it was a missed miscarriage. And so I asked her if it was okay if I could just go home. And so that's what I did. I just stayed home. And that miscarriage, I think out of all of my losses, hit me the hardest because I was in a new city. I didn't really know anybody. I didn't feel comfortable. Like anytime my friends from back home would call me, I didn't want to burden them with my, sorrow or pain or, these are the bad things that have been happening. And so I kept a lot of it internal, and I never really talked about what I was feeling. And I don't think I really knew what I was feeling at the time. And so I was actually talking to my therapist, and she knows I'm the kind of person that in order for me to do something, I have to be given homework. So I want to say this is probably 6 months after my second miscarriage. She goes, okay, I'm assigning you homework. And she said, you have to FaceTime your best friend in Houston and just kind of tell her that you're feeling sad. And that was like a big step for me because I'm not a person that just calls people and says like, hey, you know what, I'm kind of having a hard time. And I think that was extremely healing, and I'm glad that I did that, because then my friends from far away, they check in on me all the time, and they ask how I'm doing and things like that. So that was really, really helpful. So after my second miscarriage, I'm also a doer. I wanted to kind of see maybe my hormones are off. And so I contacted the health coach that does, she looks at all of your hormones and she tracks everything. And so we found out that I was estrogen dominant and I had a slow COMT. And so we talked about creating like a new meal plan and kind of like workouts to avoid to just help, because my body just is always stressed, which I've known my whole life. I'm just a very stressful person. And so I was put on a new supplement regimen. I worked on trying to get enough sunlight in the morning, enough sleep. And I also started doing acupuncture to see if that would help. And so I took about 6 months just to kind of work on myself. So after that 6 months, we started trying again. I want to say it took us about 5 or 6 months to get pregnant the third time. And this pregnancy was completely different from my first two. It was, I got extreme pain on my right side, and I Googled everything, and everything I read said, he's like, you probably don't have it, you're probably fine. And so
yeah, so when you researched it, it said you probably have an ectopic, and your partner's like, oh no, it should be fine, it's fine, don't worry about it,
it's fine. Yeah, it's so rare, you like surely you don't have an ectopic pregnancy. And so that one, I want to say I went to the ER. I think I was around 5.5 weeks because I was in extreme pain. And the ER, they did a sonogram. They couldn't find anything. They were like, we can't find a baby in your uterus. They go, but it could be too early. You could have had a miscarriage, or they had mentioned you could have an ectopic pregnancy, but they couldn't confirm. And so I just was being positive. I was thinking of the best, although I was like, this doesn't seem normal. I actually went on a ski trip like a week later, and then I came home and I was scheduled for a sonogram. I think I was around 8 weeks at that time. And the sonogram tech, she was doing, the sono, and she looked, and they actually were able to spot the ectopic pregnancy in my right fallopian tube. So after that, I was transferred to an OB, the same OB that I've been working with now for probably 1.5 years, I want to say, or maybe a year. My dates get all mixed up. But so he was extremely helpful. That pregnancy we treated with, it's a medicine. It's called methotrexate. It's an injection. And ultimately what it does is it just helps you pass the pregnancy. So every single week you have to go back for more blood work to make sure that your HCG levels are decreasing, because there is a chance for you to rupture, which can be very dangerous when you have an ectopic pregnancy. And so that whole process took about 10 weeks, and it was very, very long. It was very painful. I think I went to the ER once again after I had already started the methotrexate because I was in so much pain. But we kept going with it. And then eventually my numbers went all the way to 0. Every week with women that are pregnant with their partners doing their ultrasounds, and you're there tracking to make sure that your pregnancy and HCG levels are going down, it's kind of hard. So after my levels had dropped. I met with the doctor just to talk about what my future plan was and where we're going to go from there. And it was actually great because my doctor, based on the ultrasound that was done, even though I did have an ectopic pregnancy, my uterus had actually responded the way it was supposed to respond, which meant, some of those regimens I had been doing were helping. So that was comforting. I try and be a positive person. And so before we began to start trying for our fourth pregnancy, my doctor wanted to run some tests. And so we ran some tests, and that's when I found out that I'm heterozygous for the MTHFR gene mutation. And in addition to that, I also have the factor 2 blood clotting disorder. And both of those, the gene mutation and the clotting disorder, there's been research done that they say has resulted in recurrent miscarriage. And so he said, okay, assuming that your next pregnancy lands where it's supposed to land, he started me on a regimen. So while we were trying to conceive, I was taking baby aspirin. I've been taking methylfolate supplements, and then I made sure that the prenatal I was taking had folate in it and not folic acid. So people with MTHFR, their bodies can't naturally convert folic acid to folate. And we also have a hard time detoxing toxins in our body. There's a lot of women, so especially in the US, a lot of gluten products, they add folic acid into them. And so, learning how to be careful of some of the things that I eat to try and avoid that that folic acid, just to make sure that I'm not putting more into my body. So there was a lot of learning through that. And then once I eventually became pregnant, then I would be on additional progesterone supplements. And then I would also take a Lovenox injection every day, which is a blood thinner. I'm so thankful that I have a doctor that, believed that, MTHFR or factor 2 can contribute to recurrent miscarriages. And so our fourth pregnancy, I want to say it took us 6 months again to get pregnant. So we got pregnant again. And because I had already gone through one ectopic, I kind of knew what to expect. And I will say my fourth pregnancy, immediately when I got a positive, I knew that I had another ectopic in my right tube. All the pain was the same. I could just tell. And so a week from my first positive, I was going to the doctor's office immediately to do levels, and my levels were actually doubling, and they were doing okay. Well, they weren't doubling, but they were, I think it was like 150%. It's supposed to be 200%. But then I had a big drop in progesterone. I think it was my Monday to Wednesday was good, but then my Wednesday to Friday levels were not good. And so I went in, or it was a Thursday. So I went in that Thursday because I was talking to the nurse. I've been having a lot of pain on my right side again. And she goes, okay. And she goes, you know what? Let's just bring you in for a sono. Your doctor's here right now. Can you be here in like 10 minutes? And I said, yep. And so I got in the car. Unfortunately, my husband wasn't there because he was at work, and I just wanted to know, what was going on with my body. And so I got to the doctor's office, and we did the sono. Now it was too early to see anything, which I already knew, but my doctor was like, your right ovary is inflamed. So something's going on. Something is unhappy in your body. We can tell that. He goes, your levels are indicating that even if it's not an ectopic, you're probably miscarrying. And he said, so he gave me really 3 options. He said, I'm 90% sure you're having another ectopic. He goes, we can either wait another week to do more levels and see what happens. We can start you on methotrexate. Or the third option was, we can go ahead, now that this is your second ectopic, we should probably go ahead and do surgery and at least look at the tube and see kind of what's going on. And so I thought about it. And then 45 minutes later, I was like, you know what? Obviously, my right tube is not doing good. It's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Let's go ahead and do surgery. So I went into the surgery on Friday morning. My husband was there, and we went into the surgery really not knowing what to expect. And there's like, and I don't know if this has happened to you before, you know, if you've had doctors that have said, you know, something may be, you know, you might have a threatened miscarriage, and you're like, but you know, that little tiny chance, you know, maybe it's not, maybe everything's fine. And so, so we weren't sure, but a lot of the evidence was kind of going against us. And so we did the surgery, we went through it. And whenever I woke up from the surgery, you know, my husband was there, and they explained, you know, there was, you know, we did have another ectopic, and our baby was again in my right fallopian tube. And while they were in surgery, they did the HSG test, which is a dye test to make sure that everything's flowing properly. And they said that my right tube was just completely blocked. And so they made the decision before we went into surgery. We kind of had a plan A, B, C, and D based on what was going to happen. We ended up going with plan B, which was if my right tube is blocked, that they were going to remove the tube. So my right tube was removed. And then on my left side, they did do the dye test. And they said that the dye did flow through. He said that my left tube was okay. He didn't say it was good, which made me a little nervous. But, you know, we left the hospital, and out of all of my 4 losses, I weirdly felt hopeful. After my surgery, we had connected with a church group. They put us into these community groups that we meet with. It's comprised of 6 different couples, and we meet, you know, once a week, and we go to house. And my community group really, like, they stepped up, and they created a meal train for me, and I had a basket of goodies waiting for me whenever I came back from the hospital. And so we were just really taken care of. We were well prayed for. And I had actually joined a miscarriage and loss support group a couple months before that. And I had made friends with 2 of the girls who had also gone through loss themselves. And they also just, the community of people just surrounding us and just, you know, giving us love and, you know, during that tough time was really humbling. And, you know, I hope that I've had friends that since then have experienced loss. And I always think about all of the people and how much that was done for us during that really hard time. And I just try and reciprocate that, and, you know, just be like, I'm here if you just want me to sit and just listen, or to talk about what happened. And so that's been really nice. But so after that surgery, we didn't really know what our future looked like. That was this past October 2022 is when I lost my right tube. We didn't really know what our future looked like. And in December, we honestly thought it was going to take us quite some time to get pregnant. I had never gotten pregnant on my left side. My right side was my favorite side. I always got pregnant on my right side. I didn't even know if my left side worked, to be honest. And so in December, at the end of December, I'm pretty intuitive with my body, and I can feel when things are changing. And I was like, okay, I think I'm pregnant. And I took a test, and I had a very faint line. And of course, it was over the New Year's weekend, so I couldn't go into a doctor's office until 4 or 5 days later. But I went into the doctor's office, they confirmed everything. And these poor nurses, they know me so well now because they've seen me so much. But, you know, I went in, you know, every other day to keep doing more blood work. You know, I was doing my Lovenox injections. I, you know, was supplementing with progesterone. And I went in at 5 weeks. It looked like everything was normal. And they confirmed that I had a baby in my uterus. And I think it's funny whenever I told my friends and family, I go, we're pregnant. I said, we're pregnant with a confirmed baby in our uterus. And it's just a funny thing to say because I don't think normal thing that people tell people, but in our weird circumstance, it made sense because it was like, okay, step one is making sure that, your pregnancy makes it to your uterus and it doesn't end up in a tube. And so at 5 weeks, it was confirmed by a sonogram. And our numbers were more than doubling. We had never had positive reports before. And then we went to our 7-week sonogram, and that was the first time we ever got to see a heartbeat on a sonogram. We had never experienced that before. So, and then just recently we went to our 11-week sonogram, and now our baby actually kind of looks like a baby, and it was kicking around and swimming around because it didn't like being prodded. But it's interesting. And something that I just find especially interesting after experiencing loss is, in the beginning, you're really excited to go to sonograms and they're really fun. And I feel like after your first loss, you kind of lose that innocence of, something can go wrong. And I'm sure it's going to be like this for every single sonogram that we go into throughout this entire pregnancy. But we walk into our sonograms and I'm so nervous that I could probably throw up. I'm so nervous because you never know. You don't know what's going to happen. And I try and be realistic and prepared, but I've been trying to tell myself I'm pregnant until proven otherwise. And we've never gotten this far. And it's been really exciting. We're actually getting to points where I did genetics testing. I think we're going to find out the gender soon. And there's a lot of firsts that we're able to do with this pregnancy that we've never been able to do with our other 4 pregnancies. So it's been a really fun time. And I think on my husband's side, he, especially in the beginning of our pregnancies, he never really allowed himself to get excited. And if he ever did get excited, that's when something bad happened. And so now that we're in our 5th pregnancy, I think we're equally, talking about the baby every day, and we're both getting excited. And, I don't know what will happen. And I obviously hope that this baby comes to term. And, I think I was talking to my mother recently, and we were talking about Christmas. And I was like, well, at Christmas, I go, if everything goes well, we should have a baby. And she just kind of laughs. But I think it's part of my coping mechanism just to be like that what if all the time. But that's kind of where we're at now. And, just, we've been really excited. I started to kind of have doubt of if this was in the cards for us. 4 losses in a row are quite a lot. And just statistically, I just didn't know where we were going to end up. And so I'm just thankful every day that we've at least made it this far. So
yeah. No, it's very surreal, like when something changes like that and you're like, oh, this is different,
yeah.
For you it's a good different. For me it was like the opposite, because that's when I had losses. So I had babies, then losses. So for me it was like, this is different, what's going on?
Right.
This doesn't happen. What? You can have babies and then not have babies? What? This isn't a thing. But yeah, it must be really surreal, because obviously now, you're meeting all those first. You're actually getting those scans and those, and you're seeing the baby, you're seeing the heartbeat. I find it interesting because when you were saying about seeing the baby and meeting these milestones, I was thinking, oh, but maybe she still maybe she has the hope. Like when she goes in there, she feels really good. But it was really interesting to hear that you have the same thing that the rest of us have, which is like, I am so anxious, I could totally throw up right now. And then you're laying on that table, you're like, I feel numb. And you see the baby and like, I'm really glad I'm seeing the baby, but it doesn't mean it's gonna be here.
It's interesting. and I've heard other women say that, but I hadn't experienced that yet. And now that I'm at that point with pregnancy after loss, it's interesting that I felt the exact same way, where it kind of takes the fun out of it. And it's, I think we had to wait in the waiting room for 45 minutes before we were called back. And I was just like, I just need to know. And they brought us in, and, she immediately was like, oh, there's your baby. And I'm like, all right, hurry up. Like, is there a heartbeat? Instead of just like being able to relax and be like, oh, right, like everything's fine. So it's kind of, it's funny.
Yeah, I do this thing where I'm like, I lay there and I'm like half holding my breath while I'm just like just waiting for them to tell me something. I try and do a little small talk to kind of help, but the last time I went in, the guy was like not into small talk at all, and I was just like, fantastic, thanks. Like, you're not easing my mind at all. And he's just like he's looking for ages, and I'm like, yeah, so I had a miscarriage, and I'm very like, I want to know what's going on, kind of thing,
right.
Is the baby okay? And he's like not really answering me, so I was just like, fantastic, thanks. And he's like closing up on the heart and all that, and you're like, okay, so is that normal? Like, does that look normal to you?
Right. Is everything fine? Yeah. You have some sonogram technicians that, they'll be like, the doctor will tell you. And you're like, can you just tell me it's fine if it's fine?
Oh, no, that's good. It's like, well, you know what you're looking at, don't you? Otherwise you wouldn't be like this technician that you are, and I've seen you label everything, so you know what everything is. So what's going on, mate?
Yeah.
In Australia, it's not too bad because they actually do tell you at the scan. Like, they don't go, oh, talk to your doctor. They actually will tell you. I don't know if there's specific cases where they're like, oh, you need to talk to your doctor. We can't really give you a diagnosis right now.
And then when the ER, they don't let you see the screen and they don't say anything. So it's very like, you go in there, they have the screen turned, and it's if you ask any questions, they just say, the radiology department will review and your doctor will get back with you. And you're like, okay, well, that'll be another 2 hours. So isn't that crazy? Wonderful.
Oh, it's terrible, isn't it? But here again, it's different. Like, when I went in for ultrasounds when I was in the hospital, they had the screen turned towards me and they were checking, so it's very different from Australia to America.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm 22 weeks now.
Congratulations.
So it's weird.
Yeah.
Because with the 2 losses, I lost at sort of 6 and 7 weeks. And obviously getting past that milestone was terrifying. Getting past that bit was just like, okay, great, I'm past that. And I was like, okay, I can feel hopeful now.
No, there's still, I heard from other women that they never stop feeling anxious until the baby's here. And then you start feeling anxious about the fact that the baby's here. So.
Yeah, and it's like all the things like, SIDS and like all those things. And then you're like, oh my gosh, when can I stop freaking out? Exactly. I was saying to a lady the other day, like, I've actually started to like check my husband's breathing now.
Oh, really? I have to do that every now and then because, we have a bed that like will like lift up your head. And so sometimes they'll like be choking and I'll be like, I'm just going to lift up the bed, and it helps. So.
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying. Yeah, no, sometimes he has like a weird breathing thing that happens. And I said to him, I was like, you breathe funny at night sometimes. And he's like, okay. And I'm just like, lay on your side at night while he's sleeping. And he's like, rolls over.
Fine.
No, it's good. It's terrifying, but it's at least we're conscious of it. But yeah, no, it's scary stuff. Like being pregnant after loss is like a whole different thing. And you don't expect it until you are going through it. And when you're living it, it's just, okay, this is what I have to deal with now.
Right.
And you don't really have a choice because you're already in it. So,
Right.
but how has that been for you? Like when you found out you were pregnant, you know, did you feel that joy, or were you kind of freaking out a little bit?
Um, it's interesting to me because you see so many videos on Instagram or on TikTok or whichever social media platform, and women all the time do these pregnancy announcements to their husbands, and they record their reaction, or they'll record their own reaction of, you know, they get their positive test and they start crying because they're so happy. And um, I get terrified whenever I see pregnancy tests. I would not say they're joyful, because all I can think about is what if, what's going to happen this time. I think by pregnancy number 5, I mean, I was a little excited because I knew that one part of my problem was removed, which was my right tube. Um, but it's, I don't allow myself, and I think it's a coping mechanism. I don't think I allow myself to get excited until I can actually confirm that things are progressing the way they are. And I think that's different. Now, I've had friends that have experienced loss that whenever they get their pregnancy test, they're so excited. And they're so excited to do the journey again. That wasn't my personal experience. I was excited to know that I could get pregnant again, but I think there's so much behind it of just being scared and anxious of what's going to happen. I would say now I'm feeling joyful and happy. I would say that started happening probably when it was confirmed through kind of some of the blood work that we knew that this was moving forward and that we were getting positive results. But yeah, the joy I feel like was kind of taken away after pregnancy, probably number 2 of getting a positive test.
Yeah, and I think you know, I mean, like you said, you said you felt oddly like relieved and oddly like kind of like, yes, like when you had your tube removed. You said it felt kind of weird that you felt
Yeah.
good about it. But yeah, I mean, obviously that was part of the issue that was happening in your body. So that would have been relieving in a
Yeah.
sense, because you're like, okay, well, that's removed. So that means that I'm more likely, right? It's gonna happen now. It's gonna happen for me. And I think yeah, when it did happen, you probably, there was probably like a slight expectation of, oh, I'm gonna be okay with this, I'm gonna be happy with this. But then obviously, you know, the reality of, oh, I'm pregnant again. Okay. Am I going to be okay? Is it going to go okay? Am I going to have the same experience? But it's just that reliving because you're in that moment again. And I like that you call it like in utero, like, yes,
Yeah.
the baby's in my uterus. It's been confirmed. Like, and that's
Yes.
something so many of us take for granted. We're just like, yeah, I'm pregnant again. You know, we don't go, oh, it's in utero, you know?
Yeah. It's like, no duh.
Yeah, obviously it's in your uterus. Where else is it going to be? Well,
Yes.
I could tell you a few places.
Exactly.
No, it's so mad. It's just, yeah. I spoke to a lady yesterday who had IVF, and she, not yesterday, it was a while back. And she had 3 ectopics in different places.
Yeah. I heard it's common with the IVF. Yeah.
Yeah, it blew my mind. Blew my mind. I mean, yours was natural, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a bad tube. Now, there are women, I'm in quite a few support groups on Facebook for MTHFR, for people taking Lovenox. I'm in support groups for women that have had ectopics. And if you've had one ectopic, you do have a higher chance of having another ectopic, unfortunately. So there are some women that, you know, they had their right tube removed and then they had another ectopic in their left tube and then they had that one removed. Then at that point, your option would have to be to move forward with IVF and hope that, you know, the embryo implants itself in your uterus. So things do get a bit more complicated.
Yeah, I would have thought after you had one tube removed, the sort of problematic one, you know, then it would be okay. But I guess it's one of those things again where you're like, oh well, I've had that removed now, so I'm fine to have a baby. But there's still risk. Yeah,
Right.
wow. I didn't even think of that. I don't even know why. Like you just
Yeah, well, and that's what made me, I think, a bit nervous about my personal situation is when my doctor said my tube looked okay. And I was like, okay, so he said it's fine for now, but he said there was a little bit of blockage in my left tube actually. And so I've always, you know, I just have to know that for the future, for future pregnancies, and know that something might happen to my left tube. You know, I hope that it stays unclogged, but you know, after this pregnancy, if we want to start trying again, I'm probably going to go in for another dye test to make sure that my left tube is still open. So, you know, it's very fluid. Things can change. So,
yeah.
you know, just staying hopeful it just remains open for as long as possible.
Yeah, gosh. I mean, it sounds like you know you don't seem to have a problem with your eggs. Like your eggs seem pretty fertile. Like you know, because you're getting pregnant. It's just the tubes that you know sound like it's the issue. So I mean,
Yeah.
from lots of women talking to me, I would say like you know if you did want to go a different route, like IUI would probably be okay because IUI is just like where they just get the egg and they like let the sperm do its thing. So,
Right.
you know, it's not too invasive or anything. And then, you know, they can turkey baste it back up there.
Exactly. And I think they scrub the sperm that you have the best of the
Yeah.
best. But
Yeah.
we've luckily, I didn't know what our fertility journey was going to look like. And, well, you know, I'm always very blessed that we typically have always been able to get pregnant fairly quick and easy. I have a lot of friends that they've never had miscarriages, but they have a really hard time just getting pregnant. And so, you know, which one's worse? I don't know. I think they both suck. So, but you know, we've had our own obstacles and our own difficulties, but you know, I'm blessed that at least we know that some of the functionality has been working the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, I think it all just comes with its own trauma. Like it just depends on your own individual like drama, I guess.
Yeah.
So like for you, you know, your trauma was like going into the hospital and like obviously having the ectopics and that's trauma, you know, you have to do all that. And obviously not getting like constantly getting a no when you're trying for a baby and you know thinking okay this you know this my body, is this what is it, and never getting answers. I mean that's a kind of trauma as well because obviously you just don't know, and we all want control in some way, don't we want to have some kind of control over our lives, you know, a little bit, you know.
Right. It's gonna happen now.
Yeah. I love how you were like, oh, I'm just gonna take my work with me into my like miscarriage. I'll just no worries.
I'm very glad that I had a support system at work that my manager at the time had also experienced quite a bit of loss. She actually has a really wild story of whenever she conceived much later in life. And so knew where I was coming from, just because she had experienced her own losses as well. And then the director that I ended up calling, him and his wife had experienced loss as well. And so it was really nice because my manager ended up calling me at the hospital and just said, "Hey, I heard that what you're going through." She was like, "I'm so sorry." She goes, "Take as much time as you need." And I was like, "Okay." I go, I'll probably take a day and then I'll come back. And she was like, "No, just go ahead and just take a whole week." She's like, you're fine. She goes, "I want to make sure that you're able to process what you've just gone through, and that you're taking the time that you need for yourself." And at the time I think I was mostly numb, so I didn't really know what to feel. So I was just at home, not working, but not knowing how to feel. And but I'll never forget just how much support that she gave me. And I was at a support group recently that I had told my story about going to the ER and having to, trying to bring my laptop. And her story was actually the opposite, where she told her manager that she was having a miscarriage and that she had to go to the ER. And they said, "Okay, well, we also need all these numbers due by the end of the day. So can we still need you to work on everything." And I just was like, oh my, I gave her a hug. I was like, "I cannot believe, I am so sorry that they did that to you." But, just as I'm just glad that the people that I personally worked for gave me the time to just grieve and to give me grace, just to, take care of my own emotional needs, which I didn't honestly know what I needed at the time. So, but very thankful.
Yeah, no, that gosh, yeah, I mean, you had to have known, like, someone at some point has been like, right, so you still need to do all this work. Like,
Right.
it was gonna have been someone's reality. I'm very glad it wasn't yours, because yeah, but
I probably
yeah,
would have been fine, but
yeah, you must have felt really weird though, like, feel what I need to feel and deal with things for a week. What am I dealing with? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's so surreal. Like, I think you're in shock and you have to deal with that shock somehow.
Yeah.
But if you've got no idea, it's really hard to get to the emotions and like how you actually feel if you're just kind of in shock. I don't know about the hormones running through your body. I mean, I just got really depressed in that beginning part, like during that loss season. So I don't know if like going through surgery or anything like that gives you like adrenaline or any kind of like natural hormones or anything like that. But yeah, did you feel anything like natural hormone things that did anything to you, or not really?
Not that were helpful. I would say after every miscarriage, I went through miscarriage and my first ectopic. I definitely went through a depressed phase. And I would say my personal grief, I didn't know what I was feeling until a lot later, like months after my losses. I want to say the worst depression I had was after my second loss. And that was the one where I kept to myself a lot. But I mean, it had been months and I was sleeping a lot and I didn't really want to be social. And my husband kind of started noticing, Cara's not really being herself and she seems kind of sad. But I didn't at the time didn't think maybe this has to do with my miscarriage. I think I was just going through like a seasonal funk at the time. So for me, my grief catches up to me way later after my losses. But after my depression era, I personally then get very angry. So I spent a lot of my last year just feeling very angry about like, why me? How come, everybody else is, I think at that year, so many close friends were getting pregnant, so many people were having babies, and I'm still trying to figure out where we're at, why it hasn't been in the books for us yet. So I'm glad that I feel like my anger phase is finally maybe over.
Yeah.
Maybe now it's more into the anxious phase, but it's something that I've noticed where I was like, I'm having a lot of anger that I need to resolve.
Yeah. Oh, so many women have the anger thing. And I hear often women say, it's 1 in 4. Where's my 1 in 4? Like,
right.
I've
had 5. One of them should have been okay.
So, I think when you've gone through that, like, I'm glad we could sort of half laugh about it, which is like, it's a bit weird, isn't it? But
I try and find, some people probably don't appreciate it, but I laugh through my pain, and it probably makes people uncomfortable, but that
you know what? Yeah, I think it makes people who haven't gone through pregnancy loss uncomfortable, but I feel like most people who have been through pregnancy loss, they're just like, actually, that is kind of like funny-ish. It's yeah. I say, I was the statistic, and then I had my second loss, which kind of ruined it.
Yeah.
Because I had 3 children, and then I had 1 loss.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm the 1 in 4, okay. And then I had another one. I was like, just
come on,
ruin it, didn't you? Just
exactly.
if you don't laugh, you'll cry. And I think laughter is healing, and crying, I mean, crying can be healing too, but
yes,
it can also be really wet and gross.
That's true. I've told my story quite a bit in different support groups. And I can always tell women that it's their first time telling their story, because the first time I told my story, I don't think anybody could understand me. I was crying so much because I think I was also trying to heal myself by just, putting it out into the world that this thing had happened to me. But I think what's helped me is just, it's been a bit therapeutic, I guess, is just telling my story. And I'm probably a bit too matter of fact about it. But I say my story and I'm like, yep, that's my story. Thank you. And I smile, and people are like, okay, next. But I think I try, and even before I was pregnant, I feel like, especially in these groups, I always just tried to be hopeful. And I think my husband and I, Dan, we've always tried, out of all of our losses, just to keep remaining hopeful and just saying, we hope this is going to happen, and just trying to remain optimistic. And so I feel like that's part of the reason why I got to where I am now, is just by trying to stay positive, even though sometimes you're really, really angry. So,
and anger's normal. Like it's just natural to get angry, especially when you're expecting something and it doesn't happen the way you're told it's supposed to happen. You're told, oh, well, your body knows what to do, your body's good, your body can do this thing, and it's natural and it's fine. And then it doesn't, and you're like, well, but you said, like, that's what I learned in school, and they told me my body was amazing and my body did all this stuff. Like, why isn't it doing it?
Exactly.
I think school sets us up to just be so angry. It's all school.
Now, my mom did have 1 miscarriage before me, and she always was open about that whenever I grew up. So I'm glad that, I think some women go into their first loss never really thinking it would happen to them. But I think knowing, my mom went through, she had only had her 1 loss, but just her openly talking about what had happened and how she felt about it, I feel like was helpful to me. And I hope that whenever our children grow up, that, and I was thinking about this recently. I was at church on Sunday, And I don't even know what made me think about it, but it kind of made me sad because I was, we're trying to be hopeful. I'm thinking, hopefully this baby is going to be Earthside. And then I was like, man, they have 4 other siblings that won't be able to experience, the kind of things that baby number 5 is going to be able to experience. And it made me kind of sad, but I, I don't want our baby to grow up not knowing, hey, you had 4 other siblings that are watching over you. So I feel like that's going to definitely be part of our upbringing of, we have 4 angels that are watching over us. We actually have, it's my husband's aunt. But for Christmas, it was so thoughtful. She got us an ornament that we can put on the Christmas tree every year. And it says something along the lines of, like always thinking about our 4 babies in heaven or something along, those lines. And I just couldn't get over how thoughtful and sweet that was, and how every Christmas we get to put that ornament on our tree. And, like to me, I think it's sweet. And some people are like, that's incredibly depressing. But I never planted a tree for my babies. Some people had tattoos, or people, they had like a memorial, or maybe it was like rings that they created. And I always felt a bit guilty that we never had a memorial for any of our losses. And I feel like that ornament really meant a lot of like, now we have our place, for our babies. Of course, they stay in our heart all the time. But anyway, that was really special to me. And I just can't get over how thoughtful she was to think of giving something like that to us. So
yeah, that is really,
yeah.
I think it's hard to do something, for the babies in that way, because, you don't always have something physical. You don't always have like something to bury or do anything with. So it's like, well, what do I do to honor or do something to sort of acknowledge their existence?
Right.
We've opted for, we're going to be doing a birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've got 3 kids already, and we did like a thing where we went outside and we looked up at the stars on the due date, and we all just like said that we hope the baby's happy in heaven, and that the baby's okay, and that we miss the baby and love the baby. And that's pretty much what we did to like honor the baby. Yeah. And then after that, I said, to my husband, I was like, that was just so sad. Like, it's so sad. And
let's do something happy.
Yeah, I was like, I want to do something nice. And I said to the kids, should we do a birthday party for the baby next time? Like for the babies in heaven? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, can we have cake? And I was just like,
yes. We can have cake.
Yeah, we can totally have cake. We can make it all pretty and nice and everything. And I think that can become like a really nice tradition that we do, that, it just reminds us all that, one, babies are so important and like beautiful. And even though they're not here, they're still loved. And I think that is a really important lesson. Like you said, like your mum just mentioning it to you, and knowing that she had a miscarriage. I think those things show our kids how important they are to us and how much they mean to us as well. Like, we can, get angry with kids, when you have yours, and you are having that baby, I've decided. I'm praying and I'm going, seriously, God. God's just like, but seriously, when you have kids, you just like, you do get angry at them, and you want to be like blessed and be grateful for them all the time. But obviously there's still moments where they rub you up the wrong way and they press all your buttons,
right?
So to have that extra added, this is how important you are, like, I think that helps. And my son has even said to me, oh, you upset about the baby? And I said, yeah, like, I wish the baby was here. And he sort of said, we're here, we're here, mummy, and that was like made me cry. But he goes, but I know you miss the babies. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, I wish they were here too. So I think that all that is just so beautiful and helpful, not just to them, but to you as well. I know a lot of women get like worried about it, but yeah, talk about the loss, talk about those babies in heaven, because they're important, and they're important to your child's story, because they'll add to that child, and I love how you say it's like they're angels looking down, and that's really how has that been with God? Because look, everyone's had a go at God. Whoever's a believer in God, even people who aren't believers in God, have still had a go at him when they lose babies. So but how have you gone with that?
It's so, every loss has been so different with how it's either, I feel like it either pushed me away or brought me closer. I would probably say the first one, I think I just, I thought was maybe just a mistake. I thought, maybe, it was a one-off, and I wasn't that angry at God. I would say after the second one, I was starting to feel things like, why me? But I would say after my third loss, which was my first ectopic, I started to really just kind of be angry. And whenever I would get comments from people with, this is God's plan. And I'm like, it was God's plan for me to be in pain and have to, go through all of this pain and bleeding for weeks and weeks and weeks. I don't think that was God's plan. But I actually recently was given a little letter, and I took a picture of it, but it's in my bathroom so that I can see it, that I feel like helped. Da-da-da. And it's, is it okay if I read it?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's by K.J. Ramsey, but it says, be gentle toward all that remains unhealed in you. The space between today's hurt and tomorrow's healing is sacred ground. Each step you take is but a footfall on a path Christ already walked before you. Each breath you take is one the Spirit breathes in you. Time and space are nothing to God and grace. Be hospitable to all that still hurts, maybe even lingers. There is a friend within you. There is a friend within all that is unfinished. And I just recently got that on Sunday, I think it was, but I feel like it helps just reestablish that you may still be hurting, and you may still have open wounds, but God's still there for you and is looking out for you. And before my sonogram, it was the night before. Sometimes I always forget, sometimes I forget to pray, or I'll like get on an airplane and, I pray like, get me to my destination safely, but I forget to pray about real things that I'm feeling, other than just praying with, my husband at the dinner table. And so the night before my sonogram, I just prayed to God, and I was like, I'm feeling really scared, and I just hope that you cover me with, your presence and help me feel less anxious. And I feel like that it really helped, and I felt watched over. I mean, and my husband reminded me after the sonogram, because we were kind of talking about it, and he goes, well, did you pray for the good things too? And I go, no, I didn't. So then I was like, thank you for, having a good sonogram and for things still progressing. And so I know I personally need to be better about just, praying for not just when things are scary, but when things are good too. And But I don't know. I mean, it's a hard question. I feel like I had a friend recently that went through a miscarriage a couple weeks ago. And some of the things she was saying is like, how can, if there is a God, like, how could he do this to me? And it's a hard question to answer, so.
Well, the thing that's been pulling me through is this thought of, well, God isn't the author of evil. He's all good. So everything, he's about is all good. So these horrible things that happen aren't he's not written it. He's not made it happen.
Mhm.
He's allowed it to happen, which is very different. And so because they've been allowed to happen, and that's through, sin and because of the fall and all that, bad things happen.
Right.
And so God's work is when he takes those horrible things and he makes them into something beautiful, or he uses them for good.
Mhm.
So, you talking to me about your journey, like that is, I think, using it for good, because there's lots of women who are suffering out there, and, your story might help a lot of women. It might touch a lot of women, and they might be like, well, I've been through like the same thing, and that makes me feel so much better and comforted, that I'm not alone, and
Yeah.
that there's still hope, because you're pregnant right now and it's going really well and the baby's in utero,
Yes.
where it should be. To have that hope, and you're giving that to people.
Yeah.
And I do believe that is the blessing from God, because God wants good things for us, and he isn't punishing us, and he isn't making things horrible for us. He wants us to have a good life. He wants us to be happy, but he doesn't promise us a good life. We're not promised to have the best time. I mean, look at what happened to Jesus, bless him. So, we're not promised. We're promised suffering in many respects, really. I mean, he doesn't make that suffering happen, but he does allow it. So, I guess you could say, I guess I can see why people get annoyed. But the other thing is that it's not about whether God allows you to go through something that you have the strength for or not. It's about the fact that you can always lean on his strength, because that's the way I see it. Like, I know a lot of the time it's not my strength that I'm like clinging on to, because I don't have the strength. Like,
Yeah.
I feel it in me. I'm like, yeah, that 2 months I did not have the strength, and I had to ask. I was like, give me the strength, because I can't do it. I
Yeah.
just can't. And I had 3 kids who needed me, and I was like, I actually can't. It's just too much.
Yeah.
And I think knowing that, like holding on to that and realizing that you don't have to have the strength. You can ask him for it, and it's okay to ask him when all the negative stuff happens, when all the bad stuff happens.
Yeah.
You don't have to ask him for the good stuff. You can say, please strengthen me, please give me the strength. And that's what I've been doing for recently, because I was like, I don't want to be like, oh, please let this baby be healthy, because I mean, I don't know if that's what is going to happen, or whether that should happen, because I already prayed for that for the last pregnancies and it didn't happen. So
Yeah.
for me, I was like, I'm just going to pray for the strength to get through this. And, hopefully I'll have a baby at the end. Hopefully I'll be blessed and, blessed with that baby. But
Right.
I'm not gonna, continually pray for the health. Now, sometimes I do.
Yeah.
I do, but I try more so to pray for those things of strength, and like give me the patience, give me the self-control, because I feel like that's what we need, because whatever happens is going to happen, and God can give us that strength and give us what we need in terms of that. So that's my spiel. That's what's been getting me through.
Yes. I love it. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's been a long process to that mindset, because at first I was just really angry and got really upset.
Yeah. Understandably so. Yeah.
Yeah. And then someone told me I could have a go at God, and I was like, yes, I can. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Because you think, you can't have a go at the creator. What? But yes, you can.
Yeah.
all the time if you want to.
It
Terrible, really. But yeah, it makes you feel better.
does. Yeah.
On a final note, is there anything that you would sort of say to anyone who is going through this season right now, who's like literally in the thick of loss, not so much pregnant, and then maybe what you'd say to someone who is pregnant, who's in our shoes right now? Because I mean, I know how you're feeling. I'm sure you know how I'm feeling. So, this, like, I'm 22 weeks and I'm still freaking out. So, I went for the anatomy scan, laid there, and I was like, oh, this still doesn't mean anything. So, yeah.
I think to individuals going through loss, and I think this was a hard lesson for me to personally learn, is you don't have to go through loss alone. There are so many women that have experienced and have similar emotions to what you're going through. I think when I finally started reaching out to friends or attending support groups is when I actually realized, hey, some of those feelings that I'm feeling, there are other people that feel exactly the same way. And I think just having a sense of community, and some of these people that I met from my support groups have become some of my best friends now. And I just like to remind people that you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to, be worried that someone is going to, be angry that you reached out to them because you needed help. I think that's something I wished I had learned a lot earlier on into my losses. I didn't learn that until much later. But just encouraging people that if you're feeling sad, to call your friend and say, hey, I'm kind of having a hard time. And I'm so new into the pregnancy now that I don't even know any advice to give. Just keep praying.
Yeah, 11 weeks, I mean, yeah. When I reached like 12 weeks, I was like, great, I've reached the 12 week. I'm ready to feel better now.
Yeah. No.
Where's my better feeling? Where is it?
Exactly. Maybe after it's all done, maybe I'll have some advice, but I'm still learning myself. So
You're in the thick of it.
I'll take all the advice I can get.
Well, I can do the baby bit. I can give you baby advice,
Thank you. Yes.
After the baby comes, like, you want to talk, milk, nipples.
Yeah, all the things. I obviously need the help.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know too much about like nipple shields and things, but like, just like, moisturizer and yeah.
Right.
I know those things,
Now I'm gonna get more ads on Instagram about nipple shields.
Because it heard me. I'm gonna get the same thing as well. This is nipple shields.
Yes.
Yeah, there's like lots of things, that you learn through having a baby and that you never knew before, even down to like, wearing bloody what do you call it? Tenor lady. Like, the like pull up.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Pants. They're perfect for after a baby, by the way. They really work.
A lot of people say they're actually very comfortable.
Yes, they actually are. So and you don't have to worry. Yeah. It's nice.
Wonderful.
It's you just have to get over the fact that you're wearing an adult diaper.
Yeah.
If you do that, then you'll be all right.
I'll let you know.
Yeah. If you need any of that stuff, I'm totally here and I'm down for a conversation. But yeah, I'm with you. Like there's not too much advice to be offered except, I'm pregnant right now, and that's the best you can do.
Yes, exactly. I agree.
Just cling on to that.
Myself.
Yeah, yeah. Because everything else, you know, you don't know, and you're not going to know. So may as well hold on to what you do know for now.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with me and for telling your story and sharing your story. Yeah, and I'm going to be praying for your baby.
Thank you. You as well.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad it's in utero.
Thank you. Me too. Well, I appreciate it. Just being able to tell my story, and hopefully it helps, you know, even one person out there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll see ya.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Please note that all speakers, including experts and professionals, express information, views, and opinions that should not be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any medical conditions. If you have a medical issue, please consult a qualified professional. Speakers voice their own views, opinions, and conclusions, and they may not reflect the views, opinions, and conclusions of other speakers. Ella Rose, The Joy of Sunflowers, and its sponsors may not endorse all or any of the views, opinions, or conclusions expressed.